One thing I keep telling everybody to look out for when it comes to the housing market is pay attention to what the home builders are doing. They are essentially the leading indicator on where things are going. And in case you don't know, this is my lovely wife, Lizzie, walking with me
Hi,
today.
everyone.
She'll be joining us and giving us some company.
Yes.
So home builders are kind of having to go through a situation right now where they have to perform record price cuts and record incentives in order to get their homes sold. Most notably, we can take a look at Pulte Group, okay? They're worth $23 billion. And in order to get a $600,000 house sold, they need to spend anywhere between $18,000 to $21,000 on incentives in a normal housing market. We're talking like before prices were insane. We're talking before interest rates were 6.7%. We're talking just regular stuff, right? But nowadays, fast forward to 2025, Pulte Group has to spend on average $52,200 per sale in order to get that home sold. That is a massive, massive incentive. According to their numbers, incentives for the second quarter were 8.7% of the gross sales price, which is up from the 6.3% of incentives just from 1 year ago. Speaking of incentives, here's a house right here for sale that was last purchased in 2007 for $1.5 million. And now fast forward to today in 2025, the new asking price is $7.995 million, basically $8 million bucks. They just listed it a couple of weeks ago for sale. Let's see if they're going to get anywhere near what they're asking. So back to Pulte, they say that they are adjusting their net sales prices where necessary and focusing sales incentives on closing cost incentives, especially mortgage interest rate buy downs. So this is still the number one tactic and the number one thing they're throwing money at in order to get people to buy houses. And it makes perfect sense, right? Because if you lower the price, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, and then you give the home buyer a 5% or 4.5% interest rate, that just might be the winning combination to get somebody to purchase in this environment, which is something that a lot of normal sellers on the resale market are just unwilling or unable to do. And by no means is Pulte Group going broke, okay? Their Q2 of 2025 gross margin still came in at 27%. So they still have room to lower prices and throw even more incentives at the home selling market if necessary. And even though they're throwing all these incentives at getting these homes sold, their gross margins are actually higher today than they were before the pandemic. In Q2 of 2018, their gross margins were 24%, and in Q2 of 2019, it was 23%. So they're actually doing better today than they were back then, which just goes to show you that there's still a lot more room to cut prices if necessary, and they won't hesitate to do so because remember, home builders are in the business of selling homes, not letting them linger on the market and, oh, let's wait and see, maybe we'll get my price, maybe not, maybe we'll try again next year. No, that's not what home builders do. And that's why they're the leading indicator of the market, because they force the market in the direction that's necessary to get homes sold. And here's something that everybody has to remember. All these incentives, specifically the mortgage rate buy down, is essentially a price cut. And they're already cutting prices, okay? But these mortgage rate buy downs are an additional price cut. And then you might ask yourself, well, why don't they just cut the prices even further instead of do these mortgage rate buy downs and all these shenanigans to get houses sold? Well, the answer really just lies in their reputation and trying to protect everybody who has already purchased in their communities. Because one thing that they don't want to see is home prices plummet in any of their brand new communities. For example, if you were to buy a brand new $500,000 house from Pulte, a year and a half ago, and they started selling those same houses for $400,000 today, you would probably be pretty pissed off as the home buyer who now has a house that is worth significantly less. Now, they do still do that to some extent, but they try to minimize that damage by offering other incentives instead. But remember, you as the home buyer, this is actually not that great for you, because when you're going to purchase one of these brand new homes, buying the house at a higher price and then getting these mortgage rate buy downs and these little tricks and things like that ultimately lead you to a situation where you're going to have a higher property tax bill indefinitely moving forward because your purchase price is higher than it really needed to be. So this might work to help try to preserve values in the community, but it's not so great as the buyer's perspective in order to get the best deal on property taxes in the future. Also, according to the data from the home builders, I don't know if there's proof of this or not, but their claim is that every dollar that they spend on a mortgage rate buy down versus a price cut delivers a greater monthly payment reduction for the buyer than the price cut would. So I haven't done the math on that, but that's what they're saying. And I guess that's what people are ultimately worried about, which is always the focus in the wrong direction. Like, people are always worried about what's the monthly payment, right? But what you should be worried about is not just the monthly payment, but also your purchase price, because that's the only thing that can never be changed after you buy the house. And that's probably one of the reasons why mainstream media is able to get away with this myth that, oh, the only reason that home buyers aren't coming back into the market is because the interest rates are too high. You know, as soon as they lower them down, everybody's just going to come flooding back in. But you got to remember, the home builders are doing a combination of both. They are cutting the prices and lowering the interest rates. So if you only have one piece of that puzzle, you are not going to see the buyers come back nearly as much. And even then, the home sales for these new builds are hurting right now. Even under ideal circumstances with generous price cuts and generous mortgage rate buy downs. And they want you to believe that this is the more advantageous situation for you because, well, it's going to lower your payment by more than lowering the price. Well, if it were me and I have a choice, I would rather take the lower price. There's going to be less mortgage that you're going to have finance, which means you're going to pay less interest over time. It also means that it's going to be easier and faster to pay down your mortgage in the future if you want to go mortgage free, and it will allow you to have the lowest property tax bill possible on that brand new house. Here's the other thing too. There are downsides to accepting a mortgage rate buy down rather than a price cut, especially if the mortgage rate buy down is only temporary, which many of them are. Some home builders actually will do a permanent fixed rate and give you a fixed rate at 4.5% or 5% today. That is out there. If you can get that, that's the much better deal. But the temporary ones, that means that you're going to have your payment increase over the next few years as that mortgage rate buy down runs out. But besides that, let's say interest rates actually go down in the next 3, 4, 5 years and you want to refinance. Well, you might actually be in a position where you won't be able to because you already have the lower mortgage rate. And so you paid a higher price for the house, but you already got the lower mortgage rate that you would have gotten if you would have waited. So there's that problem. Also, you're being tricked into overpaying for the house by accepting that mortgage rate buy down, which means as property values go down, like we're seeing in many parts of the country now, you are more vulnerable to being underwater on your mortgage than somebody who accepted a much lower purchase price and didn't have a mortgage rate buy down. So once again, it always comes back to the same thing. Having that mortgage rate buy down is not nearly as beneficial as just getting a lower price. They want you to believe it is because they're going to say, well, your payment's going to be $50 lower, but don't fall for it. Try to get the lower price instead. Even according to another home builder, KB Homes, which tends to favor direct price cuts rather than the incentives that other home builders do, really actually came out and said that home buyers could be overpaying for today's houses if they're accepting these mortgage rate buy downs rather than getting a price cut. So you literally have another home builder calling out the other home builders and telling you straight up that you're probably overpaying if this is how you're getting the biggest discount, is getting that mortgage rate buy down. So something else to think about, guys. Here's a quote from KB Homes. They say, "I believe that there are customers of the other home builders that are overpaying for the home to effectively get an incentive. So they're tied into this higher price that they're going to be stuck with forever until they sell that home. And they may potentially be upside down when they try to sell that versus a clean, simple, transparent way of selling the value of what we offer." And that comes from the COO of KB Homes. And here's the other thing. These mortgage rate buy downs are becoming less and less effective than they were just a couple of years ago. And that's why we're seeing sales volume continue to slow down for these home builders, because even at today's prices, even though you can buy a brand new home now for essentially slightly less than an existing home, plus get a mortgage rate buy down, home buyers today are saying, you know what, that's still not good enough, which is great, because it means people are holding out for better deals and better affordability into the future. And that's eventually what we're going to get. That's already the direction things are headed right now. So it looks like, based on the data, that home builders are going to have to continue slashing prices and continue offering generous mortgage rate buy downs just to be able to maintain the sales volume they have right now. But if they want it to increase, they're going to have to step up the incentives and step up the price cuts, which ultimately leads to lower prices for everyone, including on the existing resale market. So that is good news for would-be buyers who have been holding out. And we know that people are holding out because the latest pending home sales data just came in for June. And guess what? It went down 0.8% from the prior month, but it went down a whopping 2.8% year over year, according to the National Association of Realtors. And June's supposed to be probably the last hot month of the housing market, right? You have March, April, May, June, maybe half of July as being like the peak season for selling homes every single year. And pending home sales being down almost 3% year over year in prime buying time is pretty alarming. And the funniest thing is, from this report, it says that the Realtors Confidence Index shows a 4% and a 6% year over year increase in home buyer and seller traffic. So even though pending home sales are down and we're on track to have the next worst housing market ever 3 years in a row now in 2025, realtors are feeling optimistic about where things are going. And remember, the pending home sales are down at a time when inventory on the market is up. So there are more choices than there have been in the last 5 years, and that's still not enough to get the buyers off the sidelines, just like in the new home market. Now, the only region of the country that did not see a decrease in pending home sales is the Northeast. All the other three regions, the Midwest saw a 0.9% decrease year over year. The South saw a 2.9% decrease year over year. And the West, this side of the country, saw a whopping 7.3% decrease in pending home sales year over year. So it looks like the western half of the country is slowing down the most right now. And similar to our situation here in the US, but actually just worse, is Canada. Canada is seeing their home buyers pull back even more than we're seeing here in the United States. Now, actually, the existing home sales in Canada have been going up slightly over the past few months, but the economists and the real estate agents in Canada are not convinced that this is a sign of recovery over there, because really it was just a result of massive price cuts from some sellers on the Canadian housing market, which again, all comes back to the same thing. Like, there's all similarities here. It doesn't matter if we're talking Canada, United States, or another country. If you want to get houses sold, the prices have to come down substantially, so that way buyers can afford it and they feel like they're getting a deal, and it makes them want to buy it and able to buy it. And Canada is a country that's actually been lowering their interest rates. Unlike here in the United States, where we've been keeping rates pretty steady throughout 2025, they've been lowering interest rates over there. In fact, the current interest rate in Canada is only at 2.75%, whereas here in the US, we're holding steady at 4.5%. Here's what a home builder in Canada has to say about the current state of the market right now. He says, "Our industry is bleeding out largely due to taxes, fees, and levies on new housing, and we are delivering housing at a cost that people cannot afford to purchase. which is the same story here, but it's actually worse in Canada, much worse. And they just keep blaming the same problems on everything everywhere, guys, including in Canada, because the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corp, which is the National Housing Agency, they say that housing starts need to double to at least 430,000 new homes a year until 2035. So for the next 10 years, in order to restore affordability and meet demand. So they always go back to the same story. They say, well, we have to build more houses. That's why everything is so expensive. But you look around and you see all the inventory building up on the market, especially here in the States now. And you actually have to sit there and question, is that actually true? Do we have a housing shortage, or we just have a shortage of houses that people can afford? And I think it's the latter. In fact, I know it's the latter. And that's why you're ultimately going to see a large amount of pressure come down on current home sellers who actually need to or want to sell. They're going to have to lower the price because all the indicators are telling you that's what needs to happen. Even the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation is forecasting home prices to go down by 2% in Canada by the end of this year, which is similar to Zillow's forecast for the United States this year in 2025. And I know most people will say, well, a 2% reduction in home prices, regardless of where it is nothing, Michael. And I'll agree with you. It is nothing. But it needs to continue going down. Things need to continue in that direction before there's actually a major recovery. And that's one thing all of these agencies are getting wrong, like Zillow and Realtor.com and this Canadian Housing Corporation, is they believe that, well, if prices just go down for a year and then they remain flat in 2026, then somehow we're going to have some miraculous recovery in 2027. That's not going to happen. Not unless people start making significantly more money in order to compensate for the higher prices, and I wouldn't hold your breath on that happening. They talked to a real estate agent in Toronto, and he says, it looks like we're still in the early stages of this affordability adjustment. And I agree with what this person is saying, because what essentially that means is that we have a long ways to go before we return to normal with affordability. And everything that you're seeing right now with the price cuts on the existing home market, and then the price cuts and the mortgage rate buy downs and other incentives on the new home market are just the beginning of what it's going to take to draw a meaningful amount of buyers back into the market and really start getting homes sold like we were before the pandemic. I think it's going to take years before we get there. And shifting gears a little bit, here's a little bit of good news for any of you crypto people out there that have any type of cryptocurrency, is it looks like the FHFA is directing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to consider cryptocurrency holdings as part of mortgage reserve assets, meaning that you could use your crypto to help you qualify for a mortgage into the future if they start accepting this. Now, you can already get a crypto-backed mortgage right now today, but it's kind of pointless in the sense that you have to put down or put up 100% of the purchase price in crypto as a backing for the loan. So it's like you're kind of being your own bank at that point, and you have to pay interest. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to do that. But if this passes, they'll essentially be looking at it as another bank account, another asset that you have to qualify you to buy a home with a traditional mortgage. In order for it to work, you do need to hold your crypto here in the United States, and it won't require you to liquidate your crypto assets anymore in order to use it to buy a home. And as it stands right now, banks will not even look at or count your crypto holdings, no matter how much you have, as assets unless it is sold and converted over to cash. Now, they probably still won't give as much weight to the crypto because it is still a very risky asset that's volatile in its value. So they're not going to give you 100% dollar for dollar valuation on your crypto assets. So if you got $1 million in Bitcoin, they're probably going to say, well, maybe we can count this as an extra $500,000 or $600,000 in assets that this person has in order to account for some of the vulnerability and volatility that crypto has. And of course, if this does happen, then it's going to increase the amount of eligible home buyers out there who are heavily invested in crypto that currently don't have much of a way to capitalize on it. And everybody, of course, that's trying to juice home sales right now is saying how great this is because it's going to stimulate mortgage demand. And you know, everybody in the mortgage industry right now is just dying to get business because look at what's happening. The pending home sales are down almost 3% year over year. People just are not buying. And on top of that, a lot of the purchases that are happening, close to 30%, are all cash buyers. So those mortgage people aren't even getting a piece of that action. Personally, I don't care one way or another if this happens, even though I do own some crypto, because I don't ever plan on using it in this fashion. Like maybe one day in the future, it might make sense. But honestly, I just think, you know, it's just one of those things, guys, where they're trying to look at every single angle they can right now to try to juice the housing market. Whatever they can do, they're trying to figure a way to bring people back in. And that's one of the reasons why everybody is screaming to have interest rates lowered right now, even though inflation is still a problem, because they believe that it will stimulate the housing market. But really what it's all likely to do is it's probably just going to cause mortgage interest rates to go up as bond investors require a higher return on investment due to the higher risk of inflation into the future. So there's no easy answers to this housing downturn other than home prices gradually coming down. So let me know what you guys think about all this. Let me know where you think the direction of the housing market is going. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here. And I'll see you in the next one.